built a dock. That's it. Not a nightclub, not a casino, just a dock. But where I live, that dock made me public enemy number one. My name is Cole Walker. I live on a quiet lake in a quiet community, or at least it used to be, until the day I replaced a rotting family dock with something beautiful and suddenly triggered a chain reaction that nearly dismantled our entire neighborhood. You ever seen someone show up at 7 a.m. with chainsaws and bulldozers to destroy your private property without a single warning? You ever had your neighbors too afraid to talk to you because the HOA president is threatening to dig into their property records if they do? You ever sat in a courtroom knowing your family's legacy might vanish because one woman in a wrinkled sweater decided your dock had too much personality? Well, I have. And this isn't just a story about revenge. It's about control, about corruption in plain sight, and about how I turned one outrageous act of vandalism into a power play no HOA president ever saw coming. If you think a dock is just a bunch of wood floating on water, think again. This is the story of how I bought a dam to stop a dictatorship. Stick around. You're about to learn how a quiet man with a tool belt became the HOA's worst nightmare. Like, comment below if you've ever had an HOA nightmare of your own, and don't forget to subscribe. Because this story, it's just getting started. The dock that changed everything. They say if you build something beautiful, people will come. But what they don't tell you is that some people will come with clipboards, fake authority, and a grudge. It started as a weekend project. The old dock behind my grandfather's cabin had rotted to the point where squirrels refused to step on it. So I figured, why not rebuild it? Not just fix it, but make it a place my family and maybe even the whole neighborhood could enjoy. So I did. 3 months. 2,000 screws, 12 splinters. I poured my heart into it. Sunset viewing benches, underwater LED lights, slip-resistant walkways. I even carved my grandfather's initials into the corner post. When I finally stepped back and looked at it from the shore, man, it wasn't just a dock anymore. It was ours. And for a few brief weeks, it actually felt like I'd done something good. Neighbors started swinging by in the evening with lawn chairs and beer coolers. Teenagers sat at the edge, skipping rocks instead of staring at their phones. Even old Mrs. Wilson brought a blanket and a book. It felt like the neighborhood was starting to breathe again. But that was exactly the problem. You see, I live in a place called Lake Millfield. It's one of those communities where there's a neighborhood pool, matching mailboxes, and a lady named Patricia who treats the HOA like it's a personal monarchy. And when people started choosing my dock over her sad little HOA pavilion, that's when I unknowingly kicked the hornet's nest. One Saturday morning, I stepped outside with my coffee, planning to watch the sunrise from my bench at the end of the dock. What I saw instead? Floating debris. My dock was gone. Sawn up, destroyed, torn to shreds like it had never existed. And standing at the shoreline, with a crooked smile and a piece of printer paper in her hand, was Patricia Northwood. I had to act in the community's best interest, she said, as chainsaws buzzed behind her. That was the moment everything changed. Not just for me, but for everyone in Lake Millfield. Because from here on out, things didn't just get personal, they got legal. Next up, how our friendly little lake town turned into a surveillance state overnight, courtesy of Patricia and her bobblehead treasurer. HOA tyranny, when power becomes petty. If Patricia had stopped at my dock, maybe I'd have written it off as one bad decision. But no, that was just her warm-up act. Over the next few days, it became clear that Patricia wasn't just on a power trip. She was on a full-blown suburban crusade. First, she showed up at Mrs. Wilson's yard with a measuring tape. Said the grass was above community standards. Mind you, this is a woman who's been mowing that lawn since before Patricia was born. Then the Hendersons got a notice for having a mailbox that was the wrong shade of black. I didn't even know black came in shades, but apparently HOA black is its own category now, probably patented by Patricia herself. And it didn't stop there. The Chen family got fined for planting flowers that weren't on the approved botanical species list. Spoiler, the flowers were marigolds. Innocent, sun-loving, 4th of July marigolds. At this point, I started to wonder if Patricia was running an HOA or auditioning for a role in a dystopian Netflix series. But here's the kicker: while she was out issuing fake violations and threatening fines like candy at a parade, she herself had a hot tub on her back deck, installed without a single permit. The same hot tub she used to host wine nights with Bruce, our HOA treasurer, who, bless his heart, nodded along to everything like a wind-up bobblehead. So, what was really going on? At first I thought it was just about control. But the more I asked around, quiet chats with neighbors, a few side conversations by the mailbox, I realized this wasn't just petty power buying. Patricia was trying to erase anything that challenged her authority. And my dock? That wasn't just lumber and screws to her. It was competition. And that's when I realized something chilling. If she could destroy something so public in broad daylight, what else was she planning behind closed doors? Stick around. Next up, how one safety violation became the cover story for a massive land grab no one saw coming. The morning massacre, waking up to destruction. Saturday morning. I had my favorite mug in hand, world's okayest carpenter. And I was ready to enjoy my ritual, sunrise over Lake Millfield, viewed from the bench I'd built at the end of the dock. 3 months of work. Every plank measured, every screw countersunk. My grandfather would have been proud. But when I stepped out onto the porch, I froze. There was no dock, just debris, floating lumber, disconnected wires, pieces of what used to be my sanctuary bobbing like driftwood after a storm. And standing there like she'd just won a Nobel Prize? Patricia? Wrinkled jeans, oversized sweater, smug grin. Holding up what looked like a piece of printer paper like it was the Declaration of Independence. Emergency order, she said, as if that gave her permission to chainsaw my dreams. Next to her, Bruce, nodding like his life depended on it, and 2 guys with industrial saws, tearing through what was left of my dock like it owed them money. And me, I stood there, in pajamas, watching my blood, sweat, and weekends reduced to mulch. Neighbors started coming out, Dorothy Wilson shaking her head. The Hendersons walked over in silence. Even the Kramers peeked out, the Kramers who hadn't been seen outside since the 2016 eclipse. Patricia seized the moment like she was hosting a press conference. This dock violated safety standards and was built without HOA approval, she shouted. I wanted to laugh, not because it was funny, but because the absurdity had officially crossed into satire. Do you even have a demolition permit? I asked, calmly, considering I was seconds from spontaneous combustion. Her answer? I don't need one. This was a clear and present danger. She actually said that, like she was quoting a Tom Clancy novel. So I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the county permit PDFs I'd saved. Engineering reports, inspection clearances, legal signatures. Meanwhile, her order was handwritten, in cursive, on standard printer paper. She snapped back with, "It violated the spirit of the HOA." At that point, I think even Bruce started questioning his life choices. The workers wrapped up and loaded their equipment like they were clocking out of a Waffle House shift. The last beam fell, the last light sank. My dock was gone. And as I watched it float away, all I could think was, this isn't about safety, this is personal. And if you've ever had something taken from you by someone hiding behind a title, a rule book, or a clipboard, go ahead and hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. This story, it's just heating up. Because what happened next wasn't just revenge, it was a revelation. Up next. 4. Secrets and Suitcases. The Denny's conspiracy no one saw coming. Standing up. A lawyer, a grandma, and a plan. If there's one thing I've learned about HOA drama, it spreads faster than wildfire in a gossip group chat. By lunchtime, word had already gotten around. Not just about the dock, but the way it was done. Chainsaws, paper, orders, no permits. Patricia wasn't just making rules. She was rewriting the HOA Constitution in crayon. So I called Tom Bradley, my childhood friend turned county property lawyer. The guy who once built a fort with me out of milk crates and now builds court cases out of fire. "Cole," he answered on the second ring, groggy but alert. "Is this about the dock thing I just saw next door? Tell me that video isn't real." "It's worse," I said. "She brought chainsaws, and Bruce—" There was a long pause. Then Tom sighed like a man already mentally charging billable hours. "I'll be there in 20. And he was. Briefcase in one hand, legal pad in the other, he stepped onto my porch like a cowboy walking into a saloon. He surveyed the dock wreckage, snapped a few photos, and muttered, "This is criminal mischief, destruction of property and abuse of authority. You're sitting on a slam dunk." But the real momentum shift didn't come from Tom. It came from Grandma Dorothy Wilson. Now, Dorothy's not actually my grandma, but she's got the sass of Betty White and the memory of a human security camera. She's lived in this community since rotary phones were a thing, and Patricia messing with her plants? That's war. "You know what that woman told me last week?" Dorothy fumed, pulling weeds like she was yanking out injustice. "She came over with a tape measure and said my hydrangeas were too expressive for HOA guidelines. Too expressive. What is this, a poetry slam?" That's when it hit me. It wasn't just about me or the dock. Patricia had been using her title like a taser, shocking anyone who didn't fall in line. The Hendersons got fined for a mailbox shade that was too glossy. The Chins were threatened for growing non-approved roses. One neighbor got cited for putting up Christmas lights 3 days early. Patricia wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was curating it like an art museum run by a tyrant. Tom sat with me and Dorothy under her arbor, sipping lemonade and sketching out options. "She's bluffing," Tom said. "No HOA president can unilaterally enforce property changes without board approval and legal process. And if she's tied to any third-party interests, like that Lakeside Development Group, this goes from civil suit to conspiracy." Dorothy leaned in with a sparkle in her eye. "Cole, honey," she whispered, "I saw her meeting with a man in a suit last Tuesday at Denny's. Not her usual bingo crowd." That was our spark. If Patricia was working with developers, trying to turn our lake into her little profit pond, we had a shot at blowing this wide open. Next up. 5. Denny's and developers. The secret deal that changed the lake. Let's just say, if lakes could talk, ours would be screaming. The hidden agenda. Lakeside LLC and the secret lease deal. Turns out, when your dock gets chainsawed by someone in wrinkled jeans with a clipboard, you start asking questions. The next morning, Tom and I were parked outside a Denny's, sipping burnt coffee and trying to look casual, which is hard when your lawyer keeps whispering legal jargon between bites of pancakes. Across the parking lot, we spotted Patricia. Hair teased, sweater pressed, carrying a folder thicker than a tax audit. She wasn't meeting her book club. She was meeting him. The man in the suit had developer written all over him. Shiny watch, smooth hair, and the kind of leather briefcase that probably cost more than my rebuilt dock. We grabbed a booth inside, close enough to hear but not close enough to draw suspicion. Tom pretended to scroll his phone. I pretended to care about the menu. But my ears? Locked in. "Once the docks are gone," the man said, "we roll out the unified waterfront plan. Premium boat storage, private access, $200 0 cents monthly use fees. Lakeside LLC handles maintenance. You get a $2,000 0 cents monthly management cut." And there it was. The chainsaws, the fake violations, the community shaming. It wasn't about safety or aesthetic. It was a business deal. Our lake wasn't a community space to Patricia. It was a gold mine. The plan was simple. Demolish private docks. Declare the HOA as the only legal waterfront manager. Lease the rights to Lakeside LLC. Profit, control, repeat. Tom leaned in. She can't do that. HOA boards don't own individual water rights unless specifically deeded, and she sure as hell can't sign a commercial lease on behalf of residents without a vote. But Patricia? She was already bragging about issuing new citations and removing outdated structures. You did great with that Walker guy, the man told her. Send a few more fines, scare the others. This thing's in the bag. They clinked their coffee mugs like it was a champagne toast to corruption. Meanwhile, I sat there trying not to scream into my scrambled eggs. This wasn't just a petty HOA vendetta anymore. It was corporate theft, disguised as neighborhood beautification. I looked at Tom. We need more than just a lawsuit, I whispered. We need to flip the game board. And that's when he smiled. Then you'll need to own what they want, he said. Not just defend it, control it. Control it? I had no clue what he meant yet, but the seed was planted. And spoiler alert, that seed would grow into something big enough to drain an entire lake. Up next, 6. Draining the empire, the power play no one saw coming. Yeah, this is where things start getting biblical. Draining the empire, when control flows downstream. The moment Tom said to own what they want, something snapped into place like the final click in a combination lock. If Patricia and her developer buddies were banking on lake access, then what happens when the lake disappears? 2 words, Millfield Dam. I spent that whole night digging through county records, historical land deeds, even an old article about the mill that originally built the dam back in 1965. Turns out, Millfield Lake wasn't just a pretty pond behind our cabins. It was a man-made body of water controlled entirely by one piece of infrastructure. And here's the kicker. That infrastructure, the dam, was about to be auctioned off. Public bankruptcy listing. 5 days away. No current owner. No protections. It was just sitting there, like a loaded chess move, waiting for someone to see it. I didn't sleep. I drank gas station coffee and made spreadsheets. By morning, I had one terrifying conclusion. If I didn't buy that dam, Patricia's developer friends would. And then they wouldn't just own the lakefront. They'd own the lake. The next 4 days were a blur of mortgage applications, phone calls, and trying not to hyperventilate into a paper bag. I had to refinance my family cabin, the same one my grandfather built with his bare hands, the one my dad taught me to fish from. Putting it up as collateral felt like strapping my past and future to a rocket I couldn't control. And yet, I signed $180,000, 0 cents. That was my bid. The auction felt like a hostage negotiation crossed with a poker game. Me in wrinkled khakis. Them in $2,000, 0 cents suits. Everyone trying to pretend it wasn't personal. But it was. When the gavel slammed down and I heard the words, sold to bidder 22, I didn't feel triumph. I felt a surge of quiet, dangerous clarity. Because now I owned the gate, the switch, the water line. The same HOA that had claimed I was a threat to community harmony was about to learn what happens when you make an enemy out of the water guy. I called Earl, the dam's old operator. Earl, I said, Monday morning we start draining it. Not dry, just low enough to make some folks rethink their life choices. He chuckled. You're the boss now. And just like that, the flow of power shifted, literally. By dawn on Monday, Patricia had bulldozers on my property, cameras rolling, and a fresh clipboard of citations. She had no clue the lake behind her was dropping 3 inches every 15 minutes. At first, no one noticed. Then someone's boat tilted. Then the floating dock behind her tipped like a sinking cake. Then the waterline disappeared under her brand new heels. I walked down, calmly, holding the certificate of ownership like a reverse eviction notice. Patricia, I said, you've controlled the land long enough, but now I control the water. Her mouth opened and closed, then opened again. It was like watching a power outage happen in someone's soul. As the lake drained, so did her authority. And the best part? It was all completely legal. Up next, 7. The collapse of control when bullies run out of water. You don't win against people like Patricia by yelling louder. You win by making sure the microphone is underwater. The Great Dry Down, how a lake taught a lesson. You ever see a bully realize the world doesn't revolve around them? It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, like the sound a boat makes when it settles onto mud. That Monday morning, Patricia came, dressed like a queen presiding over a land seizure. Hair sprayed into oblivion, clipboard in hand, sunglasses she probably thought made her look like the sheriff of progress. She didn't even look toward the water at first. I wish I had filmed the exact moment she did, because let me tell you, you've never seen confusion age into horror so fast. The lake was shrinking like a bad secret in the sunlight. Boats tilted awkwardly on dry shoreline. Docks hung like forgotten ladders to nowhere. Her bulldozer team paused mid-step like they'd hit a ghost. And then came Bruce, our trusty HOA treasurer, holding 2 coffees and no idea what universe he just walked into. Trish? That's all he managed before his mouth hung open like a confused golden retriever. By now the neighborhood had gathered like spectators at a magic show. Phones out. Whispers flying. And I was standing calmly on the new shoreline sipping my coffee with a dash of poetic justice. "Morning, folks," I called. "Beautiful day for a hydrologic reckoning, don't you think?" Patricia stormed toward me, red in the face, heels sinking into the damp ground. "You can't do this. You're sabotaging community infrastructure." I shrugged. "No sabotage here. Just responsible water management from the legal owner of the dam." She waved her clipboard like it was the Constitution. "You'll be hearing from our attorneys." "Oh, I hope so," I said. "Tom loves new material." Neighbors chuckled. Even Bruce looked like he wanted to disappear into the mud. But here's the thing. This wasn't just about revenge. This was a teaching moment for everyone. Because something shifted that day, and it wasn't just the water level. Mrs. Wilson, lemonade in hand, stood near the edge and said, "Looks like Patricia's plans ran a little dry, huh?" The whole block laughed. But it wasn't cruel laughter, it was relief. For months, we tiptoed around petty citations, secret HOA rules, and threats dressed as memos. Now, we were seeing what power looks like when it loses its illusion. Because the truth is, Patricia wasn't some master strategist. She was just a woman with a clipboard and a bad habit of thinking fear was leadership. And when the lake went low, her authority went with it. By sunset, the bulldozers were gone. So was Patricia's confidence. And most importantly, so was the silence. Neighbors started talking again, laughing, planning a community BBQ right there on the dry dock sand. We didn't need permission anymore. We remembered this place belonged to us. And that leads us to our final chapter. Refilled and reclaimed, the new lake we built together, where we find out what happens when a community takes the reins and how a drained lake became the foundation for something far deeper than water. The rebirth of a community, memory, legacy, and the new dock. You'd think the biggest moment was when Patricia lost. But actually, it was what happened after. 2 weeks later, I stood ankle-deep in the lake, hammer in one hand, my grandfather's old tape measure in the other. The air smelled like sawdust, sunscreen, and second chances. Around me, real neighbors. Some holding power drills, others holding sandwiches. Kids running around barefoot, painting signs that said things like Dock of Dreams and Sunset Squad. No HOA rules. No permits. Just people building something together, not because they were told to, but because they wanted to. That day, I didn't just rebuild a dock. We rebuilt us. Let me back up a second. After the showdown, Patricia resigned. Bruce slinked off somewhere. I think he's managing a parking garage in Sarasota now. The HOA board was gutted, voted out in a landslide so embarrassing I almost felt bad. Almost. The new leadership? A rotating group of volunteers. No power trips. Just folks focused on gardening, potholes, and the annual chili cook-off. We even renamed the HOA, Lake Millfield Neighbors United, because Homeowners Association had started to sound like a threat. And the lake? Oh, it came back. Earl helped restore water levels gradually, and by summer's peak, you couldn't even tell it had been drained. Except now, it shimmered a little differently. Maybe it was the underwater LED lights we reinstalled. Maybe it was the way people laughed more freely near the water. Or maybe it was because the lake had become ours again. And that dock? The new one was twice as long, with wide benches made from reclaimed oak and railings engraved with neighbors' names. At the end, we placed a bronze plaque. Walker Family Dock, a tribute to resilience, ridiculousness, and reclaimed joy. People bring guitars now. Families fish together. And every Thursday, we do Sunset Story Night where anyone, young or old, can tell a 5-minute story. Even Mrs. Wilson told one last week. She stood up, smiled, and said, "The best thing about this dock isn't that it floats. It's that we stood on it together when things got heavy. There wasn't a dry eye in sight. I just sat at the edge, toes dangling above the water, holding a photo of my grandfather, grinning on this very shoreline 50 years ago. I whispered, 'We kept your lake safe, old man, and made it even better.' So if you've ever been bullied by an HOA, or told that you don't get a say in what happens in your own backyard, remember this story. You don't need to fight dirty. You just need to fight clever. With neighbors, with purpose, and maybe with just enough boldness to buy a dam. Drop a comment if you've had your own HOA moment. Hit that like button if you believe in small communities doing big things. And don't forget to subscribe for more true tales of ridiculous drama, justice served, and the occasional sunset dock rebuild. Thanks for sticking around. And hey, next time you visit a lake, dip your toes in for me. We built this one with heart.